Trigun Stampede is a reimagining of Vash's story with all the glory CGI can muster. Has it upset a good portion of the Trigun fandom? Yes. Has it made another portion ecstatic to see the story told in a new light? Sure has. The debate on Trigun Stampede is ongoing and extremely mixed. Just one peek at the Mal comments will give you a good idea of the discourse. Here's one. If you watched the original Trigun 1998, please save yourself the suffering and skip this one. I wish I did. Unfortunately, besides the retention of some characters and setting from the original, it's a completely different story in terms of genre, presentation, pacing, characterization, atmosphere, pretty much everything, to be honest. So much so that I wonder why they bought the IP instead of making their own original show, because their vision is simply incompatible with what Trigun sought to be. And here's another. Don't let the purists decide for you. As much as the original Trigun anime was my all-time favorite in the early 2000s, this reiteration is written better than the original. The original started full of gags and fillerish episodes and took a serious turn just past half of the series, while this one is direct to the point with just the right humor elements that doesn't take away too much from the narrative. It's great. Just watch it and don't compare it to anything else. This feels like a combination of the OG anime and Trigun Maximum with tweaks here and there, which potentially may or may not surpass its predecessors. Either way, I'm excited to find out. As somebody who has watched the original Trigun multiple times and read the manga, I suppose I can see both sides here. Yes, I'm super excited to see a new take on Trigun, and at the same time, I remember seeing the Trigun Stampede trailer for the first time and being like, oh, I don't know about this. What'd they do to his hair? Why does his fake arm look like that? What is that gun? I get it. Trigun Stampede is not a remake, it is a retelling of Trigun's story. But the question is it still Trigun? There's new characters, and there's characters that appeared only in Trigun Maximum and not the original anime or the original Trigun manga. Are they trying to adapt the whole storyline, or is it supposed to follow the storyline the original show put forth? Does it hit on the story beats it needs to in order to remain faithful to the series, even if it doesn't follow the source material line for line? That is what we're here to find out. What's going on, everybody? Mike here. New year, new us, year 4, Bonsai Pop, and that means changes. Got my waifu cup in my it's filled with titty milk. But change is good, and that's why I'm here to tell you guys that we have started a new partnership with Gamersubs. Why, you might ask? And that's a great question. Basically, we realized that compared to other competing brands, Gamersubs is the far superior option, better flavors, better products, and it's better for you, which is the most important thing. Plus, they got waifu cups. So use our code BPOP for 10% off your Gamersubs, and you too can get a waifu cup, some titty milk, and guacamole Gamer Fart 9000. Those are my suggestions. Those are ones I like. Anyway, appreciate it. And on with the show. So to answer the question, is this still Trigun? I think we have to start at the most obvious place, the characters, right? Trigun Stampede has a rabble of characters we already know. Vash, Meryl, Wolfwood, Legato, Knives, Rem. It's a cast that we are familiar with, but do these characters represent the people that they should? I have to say, despite being initially put off by his design, Vash does feel like Vash. He's silly, peaceful, trouble seems to follow him everywhere, and of course, he is an excellent shot. However, he also has some serious changes to his character. For one, he is pretty damn adept at just beating people up. For instance, when the Bad Lad gang boards the Sand Streamer in episode 7, he's able to just pistol whip his way through like 20 guys. That's not necessarily the Vash I know, and it honestly kind of undercuts some of the aspects of his original character. He's supposed to be a gunslinger who never shoots to kill, not a martial artist. That being said, if you watch the original anime and you see the way that he spider walks his way around things, it does seem like he might be able to, you know, I don't know, do some sweet spin kicks. That being said, giving him the ability to easily handle dozens of goons without taking a shot feels like a little bit of a divergence from his core concept. He's also carrying a 22 cal, and that is obviously a different weapon from his massive 45 caliber that he is known for in the manga and original show. His comedic nature also takes a fairly strong backseat to give way to more intense and serious scenarios. This Vash, despite looking like a cartoony remake, feels like an older, more serious version of the original, but I think that stems from the show purposefully taking a darker approach towards the series as a whole, like way darker, which is honestly pretty cool.
あなたたちが神様なの？
君たちが神と崇める男は今ここにはいない。
話して。
Awesome. Wow.
However, one of the best parts of the manga is its ability to maintain humor throughout hopelessness, and I definitely feel like Stampede Vash fails at that. While he's more serious, he doesn't have the same palpable dread that hangs over him, you know, the one he tries to hide by veiling it with silliness. Vash's past is a cloud that clings to him constantly, and while we do get some of that with this new Vash, the July incident, which is fundamental to the story in the manga and the original show, is nowhere to be found. This leaves a massive and major event out of this new series that defined part of Vash's personality, but we'll get into that more in a second. Speaking of characters that feel off, Wolfwood and Meryl also fall into that category, again, just from what we know from the old material. Wolfwood is supposed to be this foil to Vash, a man of action, because it's kill or be killed, and while he still does fill that role, he doesn't feel nearly as fleshed out as in the original. He strikes me more as just an emo kid with a bad childhood rather than a stoic undertaker with skills on par with Vash's and a skewed moral compass. But to be fair, he is literally an emo kid with a bad childhood. Canonically, he's probably younger than Meryl, but is supposed to look like he's middle-aged, and I just don't get that feeling from this specific Wolfwood. He looks like a My Chemical Romance replacement guitarist, but when it comes down to it, his purpose is to be a foil to Vash's pacifism as well as a metaphor for humanity as a whole, because he's thrust between working with knives and Vash and sees the two polar opposites of faith and humanity. It's still early on in the show, especially if Stampede is planned to run multiple seasons, but currently that struggle just hasn't been prominent, and that makes him a somewhat less than fleshed out character in the new show. Wolfwood should be the most conflicted character, but his struggle just hasn't come up yet. However, depending on how much of the manga they plan on adapting, there is plenty of time for that to change. And Vash's influence hasn't really hit him yet, whereas we start seeing it almost immediately in the original Trigun. If the showrunners do have a solid character arc planned out for him, which I assume they do, then we'll see this young Hot Topic model change into the Wolfwood we expect, probably during season 2. So while I'm not exactly happy yet with him when compared to the source, I think there's a lot of hope for his character to have an even stronger arc than in the original anime as this show progresses. Meryl, on the other hand, is probably the biggest change from her original character, by having her start off as a newbie investigative reporter who's trying to get the story on Vash. Instead of this insurance worker, she feels very naive. They've also made her very cute. Roberto, her new counterpart, kind of reminds me of that old kind of, you know, grudging cop drinking and smoking and calling everybody kid. He's the one who actually holds a lot of the characterizations that we would have expected from Meryl, while Meryl is currently pushing that naivete and innocence we'd expect from Millie if she was in the show, which she isn't yet. And that's probably my biggest gripe so far. And speaking of that, Studio Orange has been incredibly silent about Millie's character being left out, which I think is a sign of things to come. A lot of the characters feel like younger, more ignorant and innocent versions of what we knew from the original anime and manga. The complexity isn't there yet, except in Vash, but if you watch the first episode of Stampede closely, it actually explains why everybody feels off from where they're expected to be, again, when you're looking at the source material. Stampede is actually rewriting Vash's story in a way that changes the timeline of Trigun altogether. You might have picked up that the July government is searching for Vash in episode 1. Roberto recognizes their clothing as the July military police uniform. You might have also noticed that the sand steamer everybody boards later on is en route to July. Or maybe you picked up that one of the announcements the group hears on the radio is from the July government. What that means is that in Trigun Stampede, July City still exists. It hasn't been destroyed by Vash yet. This likely also explains why Vash's current bounty is only 6 million and not the 60 billion double dollars he's supposed to be worth. The characters likely feel off because the massive event that sets a lot of the plot in motion, which has already happened at the beginning of the manga and the original anime, is only just now coming up in Trigun Stampede. It's likely that we're actually going to get to see how the destruction of July changes Vash's character and how it affects his relationships with all of his friends. There may even be a big time skip after that. And that is a new take on Trigun, since canonically, he doesn't know any of these characters until after that big event. I expect that July's destruction is going to be the climax of Season 1, and it'll set the show on course for what we would have expected from a Trigun reboot. So, set your bets on that now. That being said, they're still taking a ton of events that happened after the July incident and kind of reworking them so that they happened beforehand, assuming again that it's going to happen at all. But that leads me to believe that Trigun Stampede is not so much about retelling the same story as it is about telling a new story. The arc of Vash from living amongst humans to his fall with July's destruction, and then the redemption arc as he comes into his own, learns to forgive himself, and stays fast to the ideals he learned from Rem. This could also explain why his hair is different, why he's using a different gun, etc. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see a more true to form Vash after July's explosion, assuming that all happens. I'm just speculating here, but I think July will blow up, Vash will disappear, and that will be the end of Season 1. Season 2 could start with Vash as Eric's, basically playing out the same scenario we see in Trigun Maximums Chapter 1 and 2, or the original Trigun Episode 18. And if I'm right, once Wolfwood finds him and he decides to resume his identity as Vash Stampede, Lino will cut his hair and we'll get that spiky cut we expect from the Vash that we knew. Again, this is all a theory of mine, but it makes sense given the context of what we know of Trigun Stampede's timeline so far. And this means that while we're seeing a massive shift in when certain events happen, what we're currently watching is more of a prequel to the story of Trigun than a plot that's supposed to parallel it. If I'm right, it's even possible we'll see Millie in Season 2, and Roberto isn't just a replacement for her, but instead acts as Meryl's mentor. Her current innocence gets broken when shit hits the fan in July, and she'll inherit some of the jadedness Roberto possesses throughout this season. However, all of this is besides the point, right? The question is Trigun Stampede still Trigun? And the answer is obviously yes. The original Trigun anime wasn't any more Trigun than Stampede is. Both diverge from the manga, so why even get butthurt about this one specifically? We're not watching the same story as the anime or the manga, and the changes to this series are certainly more significant than those of the original anime, but the core elements of what Trigun is are still cemented within this new show. The idea of a harsh world created by the psychopathy of knives, the question of pacifism versus inaction, and of course, you still got Vash. Just because Japanese Post Malone sings the OP doesn't mean it's a bad show. It's actually great. And the people who argue about CGI in anime, it's just ridiculous at this point. One look at the visual direction of Stampede and you can absolutely see why they made the choices they did. You can do things with CGI that you cannot do with standard animation. The show is amazingly shot. The direction, each episode is film quality, and the hyperviolence, guys, is so good. Yes, I miss Millie a lot, but I really like Roberto. Sure, Meryl is different, but look at these facial expressions. I like her new character. There is so much attention to detail put into each and every scene. The music is fantastic. The sound effects are awesome. Stampede is a production that a 2022-23 Trigun absolutely deserves. But most of you probably don't know that though. Either you didn't give the show a shot or it hasn't been advertised to you. It's not trending on Crunchyroll. People wrote it off before it even came out just by looking at Vash's haircut and his new sunglasses. Now, maybe it's because I grew up reading American comics, which work completely differently than manga does, but I have very little issue with what you'd call an Ultimate Universe adaptation. As long as it's good. The MCU kind of blows in my opinion, mostly because they don't have the rights to 90% of the characters I would give a squirt about, but look at the Spider-Verse. Miles Morales is a Marvel Ultimate character. He was created as an offshoot of the Spider-Man ethos in a completely different timeline with a completely different story, and people love him. Those movies are amazing. Even if I'm wrong about what I think is going to happen in the series, Trigun Stampede can be looked at this way. So far, it still has 90% of the original characters, the themes are still intact, Vash is the main character, and the haters are still pee-pee-poo-pooing all over themselves because it looks all modern and things aren't exactly the same as when Trigun got mostly overlooked in the 90s. You gotta remember, this was one of the 3 space western anime that serendipitously came out at the same time and got screwed over by Cowboy Bebop. And if you do love the original, and if you're one of the very few people who have actually read the entirety of the manga, then having a new Trigun is a way to get people into the old one. But above all else, I do think the new show feels like Trigun, not the original anime, but the manga. And if you're being a stickler to what Trigun is, I mean, that's it. Stampede hits those darker and more intimate moments that the original anime only touched. And we know they're going to get into those darker aspects because Livio has just shown up, which means they're expected to tell Wolfwood's story and not the condensed version that the original anime chose to create. Livio's debut also means that we're going to see a more fleshed out version of the Gung Ho Guns and hopefully a faithful portrayal of the absolute insanity that is the latter third of the Trigun manga, assuming the series gets another season. But let's be real, most people haven't actually read the Trigun manga, especially the people who are complaining about this new anime. People who have read it love it, but manga is just not as popular as anime. So what people know is the original anime, which has this nice, fuzzy, nostalgic feel, right? Stampede does not. It's being created with cutting edge tech and it feels very modern. But as far as the real uncut original Trigun that is the manga, I recommend it. But if you don't want to read it or already have, we are working on a giant video about the entire canonical story of Trigun, just like we did with Dorohedoro. It's going to be a really big video, but expect it relatively soon. And while I have some gripes and grumps with some of the characters, at least when I think about the original anime, I have faith in what they're doing with Trigun Stampede. When I watch the show, I'm honestly not comparing the two because I get totally sucked in. It really is something to behold. They are attempting to rewrite the story in a way that shows Vash's true character arc from beginning to end and not relying on flashbacks to understand his pain. And I like that. I think it's going to result in a stronger story down the line. Naito has been involved with Trigun Stampede since the beginning of its development 5 years ago. Back in July, he said, quote, "What the fans could see of this new Trigun right now is limited. What they see right now might be largely different from what I see because I'm seeing the whole picture. How things unfold, how the elements are designed, the details might be different from what they imagined, but if you see the whole picture, if you watch the whole show, to me, it feels like this is Trigun." You can tell from the quote that he knew things were going to ruffle people's feathers. He knows it's not what people were expecting. But I'm going to take Naito's advice and watch the whole show because I can already see the thought behind how the show can feel like Trigun. Right now, it's not necessarily 100% there yet, but it's super building. And I expect when the July episode hits, it's going to hit different from any piece of Trigun media we have ever seen before. So, give it a chance. Don't be that grumpy gray hair who wants to make anime great again, so bad that they can't tell when something good comes along. Yes, you can be a 90s person, you can be an 80s person, but give new things a chance every once in a while. And this is coming from a guy who mostly listens to punk music that was made in the 80s. However, I still like The Weeknd. You feel me?